Thanks for coming, everybody, and welcome. What we're going to talk about today is the Employee Engagement Challenge, and with a particular focus on how gamification can really help to tackle sickness absence and improve positive health outcomes. So I'm welcoming today Charlotte from MetLife and Kate from YuLife to talk about how their organisations are working together and driving this initiative forward. So to make a start, first of all, Charlotte, can you tell us a bit about the partnership between MetLife and YuLife and what makes it unique in the insurance space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think group income protection has been a mainstay in the industry for many years. And when you think about group income protection, I think typically you think about that real financial benefit in the event of long-term ill health, which is absolutely true. Now, MetLife has focused on early intervention, rehabilitation and claims servicing for many, many years. But our partnership with YuLife is actually doing something that's truly differentiated in the market. So combining our forces, we're now actually focused on addressing the root cause of long-term ill health. So we're focused on that preventative measure to combine prevention and also protection. And Kate, I think it's worth you touching on, what YuLife does in the market that's unique.
Thanks, Charlotte. Yes, so we've had a partnership with MetLife now for probably about 5 years, and I think we recognise an opportunity specifically in the group income protection space to do something a little bit different, probably about a year ago.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with YuLife. We describe ourselves as an insurtech, but quite often people are not entirely know what that means. But essentially what we do is bring insurance and wellbeing together in one gamified experience. And Charlotte touched on the word prevention, and I think prevention is not a new concept in the insurance industry. And I think the way that we're tackling it slightly differently is by using gamification, because ultimately, if we're going to de-risk populations over time, we need to be reaching 60, 70, 80% plus of a population. So that's what we're sort of focused on with our partnership with MetLife, because in doing so, that's how we can start to positively impact kind of health outcomes, which I'll talk a bit about shortly, and business outcomes.
Mm-hmm. I think it's safe to say we're two very different organisations.
Yeah, very different.
With very complementary capabilities, as I say, to really target that prevention and also protection.
That's great. So tell us a bit more about what is the issue, what is this engagement issue, and how is it relevant to what we're talking about today and driving out these positive outcomes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to start by, setting out the rising problem that we have in the UK at the moment with regards to increasing of long-term illness and also absenteeism. And then Kate will delve a little bit deeper into that engagement challenge that we do have. Now, currently in the UK, there's actually just over 2.8 million people who are economically inactive due to long-term ill health, which is actually quite staggering. And when you dig deeper into those figures, that's actually 800,000 people more than pre-COVID. And digging that a little bit deeper again, 44% of those absences are related to mental health problems. So we have a real challenge. And if these trends continue, by 2030, the actual cost to the economy in lost productivity is just over £66 billion, which is significant. And if you look at what that means from an employer's perspective, so the average across a small to medium employer, it's actually just under £21,000 per employee per year, which isn't insignificant in the current climate that we're in at the moment. We know that a large proportion of SMEs, medium and large employers do have early intervention measures. So the challenge isn't actually having those measures in place, it's actually the engagement in the services and the wellbeing tools that are available to really support the challenge that we currently have.
And just sort of delving into that a little bit more detail, I think, the reality is insurance is absolutely a lifeline, but it is a relatively reactive product, particularly GIP. Typically, that's going to kick in from the first day of absence, maybe a little bit earlier if the employee is connected with HR, but usually not. First day of absence at best. And so we're really thinking about how can we use gamification to build a relationship as well with the employee, because I often think that GIP is quite an employer-focused product. I don't know if anyone else feels like that. It feels like it's been designed for the employer and not for the employee. And at YuLife, we're very, very, very focused on creating an employee experience, a consumer experience, if you like. So that gives us the opportunity in the relationship with the employee to educate them on the benefit, to explain to them how important it is that they connect with HR, and also to support them on that daily basis. So hopefully, if something goes wrong, we've already created that relationship with them, we're already engaging with them, and we can help kind of drive those interventions earlier. So I think it's really thinking about how do you create a connection and engage the employee as a human particularly when you're thinking about sort of group income protection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of these days, everyone wants to know about outcomes and data and evidence. So Kate, talk us through the evidence that you have that shows that this is really working and highlighting what's different about this particular way of engaging.
Can I just explain a little bit about gamification first and the concept? Because I think there's a couple of myth busters first.
Sure.
And then I'll go into what that means for outcomes. So gamification, often people think incentivization is gamification, and that's really important. And it's often, incentivization is a useful kind of, I think, dopamine hit, and it gets people engaged on day one. But one of the things that we've been thinking about is how do we use a much broader range of game mechanics in our experience? Because ultimately, to drive sustained engagement over time, you need a much broader range of mechanics. And I'm not going to spend loads of time talking about them today, but we're thinking about streaks and surges and chests and levels and points and lots of different things. And the reason I just wanted to explain that, is, as I said, is because often people think incentivization is gamification, and it's not. So one of the things we then set out to do, so we have, in collaboration with the University of Essex, so we had a government fund from Innovate UK, probably about 12 months ago, to look at the impact of gamification and the game design that we're using at YuLife and the impact that has on health and business outcomes. So that was really interesting because it's still running, because actually we're all talking about engagement, but what's the so what of the engagement? And what we found, so we've used gold standard RCTs, a 12-month RCT trial with an intervention group and a control group. And the intervention group have received all of the game mechanics and all of the richness of the experience. And the control group have just received incentivization, which is why, sorry, I went on that slightly long preamble about the difference, so I can explain. And what we found is members in the control group in the intervention group engaged twice as frequently, so 20 out of days versus 30. Their step count is 25% higher, their BMI has gone down by 40%, and their reported levels of stress have reduced by 52%. And so there's some really interesting health stats, and what we've actually then seen, so we're then able to take our engagement data and model that with the UK Biobank data to forecast out impact on health and risk. And the data's telling us that on average, we're going to reduce health risks, obesity, cardiovascular disease, etc., by 10 to 15%. And sickness absence was reduced within companies by 11.5%. So I think it's a scientific proof that actually we underestimate, I think, the power of daily micro-actions and the impact that actually has on outcomes such as sickness absence and those long-term health conditions.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So I think one of the going-in positions is it just the healthy people that are engaging?
Yeah.
So they're bound to have a better outcome. So you've sort of touched on that. Did you want to expand on that a bit more?
And I think that's a really important point, because I think often programmes engage the already well. And that's why you often struggle to get engagement above 10 to 20%, because they're the kind of people that would have already engaged with wellbeing programmes. So we're interested, if we're going to de-risk a population, we actually need to reach those who are quite inaccessible. So we're very much about small, very easy, accessible, everyday actions. So this isn't about engaging the marathon runner. It's about a 5-minute walk. It's about a 3-minute breath exercise. It's about brain training, daily micro actions that anybody can achieve. And we've really doubled down on that. And we've been very true to that. And actually what we found is by focusing on those smaller actions, as opposed to encouraging, I mean, we do also help people if they want to go on more of a fitness journey, but actually the bulk of the work that we do is around helping people that are not already engaged.
And as an employer, do we have to accept that there will always be some that won't engage? Or do you think that, the way this has been set up, there is in fact something for everybody, even if it's just looking at information and reviewing it as their very first step?
That's a really good question. I would say that we haven't gone down the content and education route because most people know. This is not a knowledge gap or really a motivation. We need to use behavioural science to help people to embed those healthy habits. I think the reality is you're never going to get 100% engagement. But I think depending on your company size, you should be looking for around 60 to 80% engaging with the products that you're buying. But I think it also then depends, obviously, on the cohort of your workforce as well. So I think don't aim, never, 100% is probably not achievable unless you're a very small company, but I think you should be aiming for above 50% for the programmes that you're running.
Great, that's helpful. And then Charlotte, MetLife's been known for early intervention programmes. So how does this new proposition improve early detection, something that's getting flagged in a number of the sessions today, and how that really helps drive wellbeing and reducing absence?
As you say, and I mentioned earlier, you know, as MetLife, we've always had a strong focus on early intervention. We know from our data, and I'll dig a little bit deeper into it, that early support does really prevent long-term absence. Now, from our early intervention support that we do have in place, obviously now in partnership with YuLife, for those employees who actually engage in early intervention services, they're 65% more likely to return to work than those who don't engage at all. So it's quite a strong, powerful stat when you actually dig into it. Now, we've spoken about engagement. So YuLife are really those experts in connecting with that end employee. So with the industry that we work in, we work with brilliant intermediaries in the market who then work directly with clients. There's a lot of information to, I guess, distribute to the broker and then to that end client. So the YuLife engagement and gamification really supports with that education around what group income protection actually does. So beyond just that financial protection. And also encourages activities like actually proactively reaching out to HR instead of waiting for the real support that they do need, which of course helps to drive early detection and also prevention. It's also coupled with faster access to care. So the core wellbeing elements of our proposition are also made up of a virtual GP. So I'm sure there's many people in this room today that have struggled to get hold of their GP or get an appointment. And if you've utilised a GP, I have myself, I know that I can make a virtual call the same day, and if needs be, I can pick up a prescription within a few hours, and there's little to no disruption to my day. That's also, I guess, with our employee assistance programme. So that provides lots of additional wellbeing services, such as counselling, in-the-moment support, and does really tie into what I spoke about earlier, that actually 44% of absences in the UK are related to mental health. Now, we know, working in partnership with YuLife actually drive a 2 to 4 increase in the utilisation of these services that are available. I think there's a lot of value-added services in the industry, and I think sometimes there's not an awareness of that type of support that's available. We also know that if early detection does occur, that our employees or employers and employees are actually given structured rehabilitation support, they're given structured return to work plans, and it's really tailored to ensure that it meets their individual needs, because one size doesn't fit all. We're really committed to ensuring that we provide the best possible outcome to the employee and the employer. And just to close on this question, I like a stat, as you can probably tell. From our data, as I mentioned, that early detection really is key. For those who go off sick and receive support within the first month, 96% of those return to work before becoming a long-term claim. So really, really impactful and powerful, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Can I just add a point on that?
Yeah, of course.
Because I think data is going to be really important in this space. And one of the things that we are doing, excuse me, sorry, I'm croaky, in partnership with MetLife, because we've got a really rich data set. So we've got all the data that we're collecting through, as you imagine, the phone, wearables, can I just say, fully consented, and through a dynamic health questionnaire, which, as the name suggests, it's very dynamic, bite-sized questions we ask. It learns, so it'll ask questions based on your previous responses. So this data set then allows us, or is going to allow us to, it's one of the things we're building at the moment, something called preventative AI, so we can start to build path healthways. So when we see that someone's health is declining, the systems can then trigger a response. And so that's why I think we're going to become much more sophisticated within the insurance space, because we'll be able to detect much earlier on that an issue is arising much earlier in that employee's in their life, and we'll be able to trigger actions and encourage them to do challenges, consume content, whatever it might be. And that's when I think this becomes really powerful, because ultimately then we can really start to prevent claims much, much earlier on in the process. Yeah. That's kind of day 2 of what's coming next for our partnership.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Charlotte, you know, for companies, a lot of them have a lot of different health and wellbeing benefits. I know in some of the earlier talks it's been flagged that integrating everything and helping people navigate their way around what's available is a challenge. How has that been with this partnership?
Yeah, I think it will continue to be a challenge. I think there's so many rich, brilliant wellbeing and additional services available. Our proposition with YuLife actually pulls everything together. So I'll talk you through what an experience could be for an employer. Let's say we're dealing with a HR director. The business has been placed with MetLife. Both MetLife and YuLife have dedicated implementation teams. So our teams are actually specifically focused on really promoting and talking about all the wonderful additional services and support that's available. There's also an app that's available, so it's worth you having a look at the YuLife app, and perhaps, Kate, we can share some more information afterwards. The app is inclusive of all of the information around the group income protection product and proposition as a whole. So there's core information about the financial benefit that's available. And as I mentioned, there's also access points to your virtual GP, your wellbeing services, and also the YuLife element part of our proposition. So we really are trying to pull everything together in one place. And as we know, digital is going to remain a focus for many years to come. So making it really streamlined and simple for people to access these services.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then thinking about the future and what needs to change and what the insurance industry needs to embrace moving forward to keep driving off this early detection, reducing sickness absence, better health outcomes. What is needed? What needs to happen to improve all of that within the industry?
Yeah, I think I'll start with this one. I think it ties into what we spoke about earlier. I think we need to continue to focus that shift just beyond that financial protection. Of course, it's absolutely imperative in insurance. It's what we're here to do, pay claims. But I think there's so much more that could be done. We know from the research that's been conducted that employers are really looking for that preventative, engagement-driven and wellbeing solutions that proactively support not just covering for sickness, as an example. We really need to shift just from that claims-based model to more of an engagement-based model, I think.
And I'm going to continue to talk about data. It's the thing that we're really, really focused on at the moment. So I think we need to use data better. And we need to share data better as well, where relevant. And so I've already touched on what we're thinking about this preventative AI. And it goes back to your question as well about integrating everything together, because I think we need to start surfacing, as insurers, the right advice, help, support at the right time. It shouldn't be on that employee to navigate and try and make sense, or the HR person to try and make sense of how they present that together. So that's what we're thinking about, these kind of personalised health pathways. You're going to see much more of that from the insurance industry, and that's going to really help to drive early detection, early engagement. And then from the perspective of the employer, I think data as well. I hope the HR teams are going to start to demand more, and people teams, in real-time insights, like getting a monthly report or a quarterly report or a 6-month engagement report is not good enough based on the volume of insights that we have available. And so we're really thinking about how can we bring those insights together in a way that's real-time, that's really useful. So that's about real-time understanding of mental and physical health. That's about being able to drill in and see that health by demographic, by department, so you can see where those issues are. And that's also about being able to look at risks, so burnout risk, absenteeism risk, turnout risk, and the cost of that, so that you can go to your leadership team and say, look, we've got a real problem, we do need to do something about this. So that really is where I think the insurance industry needs to focus more time. Well, not focus more time, because I know lots of people think about it, but they're the things we really need to spend time, is how we're using data to support the individual member, but also to support our customers as well, to make sense, to make informed decisions.
OK, thank you. And Kate, continuing with you, we've got a couple of questions that have come in, but for a top takeaway for the audience around incentivising wellness through gamification, what would be the top point that you would want people to remember?
What would be the top point that I'd want people to about incentivise? I think I'm going to go back. Like incentivisation, it's not enough. It's helpful, and it's a dopamine hit, and it gets people involved. But I would say dig deeper. So when people talk to you about gamification, dig in, ask them about game design, ask them about all the different elements and how they're using that to drive sustained engagement, and ask them about their engagement figures. Because often what you'll see is an adoption rate or a download rate. That's not engagement. Ask them for their MAU, ask them for their DAU, dig into the data, if that makes sense, to really get a sense of, are people using this on a consistent basis? That would be my takeaway. Hopefully that made sense.
And Charlotte, for you, top takeaway?
I think I actually had a few noted down, so I'm only going to go with one, don't worry. I think we need to continually ensure that prevention is the focus. I think there's a good understanding or a building understanding within the industry as to what prevention does, but I think it needs to continue to sit at the forefront of everything that we're doing. And as our CEOs like to say, I think if we're bringing together that real prevention and protection, it will really help to keep work working.
Thank you. So a couple of questions that have come in on the Slido. The first one comments on there being very high stats on reducing absence. What sorts of companies, type of company and size of company have these results been achieved with?
Yeah, it's a good question. So that's looking at our book of business, but there were 5 customers that were involved in the study, probably ranging from, what would I say, from different industries, but probably ranging from small to what I would say mid, maybe about 5,000 size companies, and a span of a range of those, if that helps answer the question.
Yeah.
But obviously, a lot, you know, the smaller the company, the easier it is to shift that stat. There wasn't any what I would call like huge customers in there, like a huge enterprise. We're talking quite SME to what I would call probably mid-market.
Okay.
If that helps. Maybe somebody who asked that question comes from a very, very large organisation for whom that would be a huge shift.
But effectively, I think you're saying this applies to people and its behaviour change.
100%.
So actually, it can apply to any type and size.
Yeah, and there is a lot of empirical research that links improvements, particularly in physical activity, unfortunately less so mental health, but I think the research will change, that shows a reduction, more movement, more physical activity, and a reduction in sickness absence. So that's already been an established... We've already found that causal link within the research. We're now just validating that out in terms of specifically for YuLife.
OK, and then our other question, I think we can see they've been put up on the... how can gamification be used to engage employees who are considered offline?
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, look, to a certain... I'm not sure how many employees are actually probably... When you say offline, do you mean they're not engaging with the company, or do you mean is that they don't have a phone? I don't know who asked that.
Oh, no one's admitting to that one.
Yeah, because for our experience, they do have to have a mobile. It's a very simple experience. I wouldn't say you have to be, because this is the other common misconception we're talking about. Often people think gamification, they think you're a 20-year-old gamer. And look, if you look at global trends, that is a large proportion of gamers. But actually, the quickest growing is 50 plus and also female. And that's doubled since 2004. And actually, we see a similar trend. So if you look at our MAU, it's above 40% for all age demographics, but actually, it's largest in 40 to 59 and 50 to 59. So it doesn't really answer your question, sorry, but maybe it helps to illustrate the point that actually gamification is accessible. You know, lots of what I'm trying to say. It reaches a broad demographic. There may be a handful of people for whom it's not right, and I think we've got to put our hands up and say we can't do the 100% as we talked about before.
Yeah,
we're aiming for the 80%.
So I think we've got a question about how do you see it working for older workforce who tend not to engage? But I think you've probably just actually given a different perspective on that.
At YuLife, they're our most engaged audience.
Yeah.
And we often think about why that might be. Perhaps there's less of a share of we're competing for that attention. It's maybe an easier demographic who maybe don't have as many other things that they're engaging with potentially. But that is definitely our most... If you think about that multi-generational workforce, sort of our MAU looks a bit like this, which is quite interesting. Sorry, that's not a very scientific way to do it.
And Stacey has asked, was there a standout winner of what games in inverted commas were most effective?
I wanted to ask this question of the audience. So what do you think is the most successful fitness or health and wellbeing app globally? Because I think that'll answer this question. Has anybody got to go on? Somebody just have a guess. No, but that's super high, particularly for females, actually. Sorry? No, not that one. It's actually Pokemon Go.
Is it?
Yeah. It's been the most successful app globally at getting people moving, and I think that it's fun, it's joyful, and it's not boring, and it doesn't make... And the path to health cannot be arduous or boring because people will not do it. So I think that is really... We often think about brands like that, Duolingo, those kind of consumer apps that have just captured the imagination. They're the kind of things we think about when we're designing the product.
Fantastic. Well, Perfectly timed. Thank you so much, Charlotte and Kate. Really helpful session and lots of questions. Thank you for the questions. Please do remember to rate the session and let's show our appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.